We begin in the Federal Capital Territory, where there were indications on Thursday that some names on the presidential pardon list approved by the Council of State as presented by the Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, may be dropped. The development comes amid growing public outcry over the inclusion of certain high-profile and violent offenders among those pardoned by President Bola Tinubu. The Office of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice on Thursday issued a press release that the list is still under review. The presidential pardon, usually granted to mark national occasions, was also meant to decongest prisons and promote reconciliation. The presidential statement noted that the decision followed recommendations by the Presidential Advisory Committee on the Prerogative of Mercy, chaired by the Attorney General. Let's go live to Maseru in Lesotho, where we will be joined by a lawyer in person of Jaja for some perspective on the matter. Thank you so much for joining us. Jaja, what are the reasons behind the likely removal of some controversial names from President Tinubu's pardon list?
For example, the percentage of persons who are pardoned, who were convicts of hard drugs, the proportion is more than, you have a list of 175, over 25% are persons with hard drug convictions. So it raises questions because these, if you know what hard drugs are, it's usually organized by a cartel, organized crime. So the thinking is, these are the people that could afford money or political connections to get their persons pardoned. Because ideally, when you're doing pardon, presidential pardon, you consider persons with misdemeanor, that is lower crimes, petty crimes, before you consider people with felonies. That's the ideal thing to do. So you consider gamblers or persons who committed petty crimes. The proportion should be more than those who have committed more serious crimes like hard drug, trafficking in drugs. So I think that's the reasoning why there's been a reconsideration, because the current list, the proportion of serious felonies, crimes, is more than those with lesser offenses.
Now, for a list that went through the Council of State, of course, the President probably saw that list, as well as even the Attorney General of the Federation, to go through all of that, and then we end up this way. Is it something that surprises you?
No, I'm not surprised. I've worked with the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation before. The man is bogged down with a lot of duties. That is why they have asked for a separation of the Office of Minister of Justice from the Office of Attorney General. So this power, this function was delegated to the Presidential Committee on Advisory Committee on Prerogative of Mercy. Whether they did a thorough job, whether they had a criteria, whether they had terms of reference is another issue. It raises suspicion whether there was influence, because if drug dealers could have the lion's share of their members, it raises concern whether that committee really used the criteria to select those who were on that list.
Now, how does this tell, or what does this tell us about, how credible and even how transparent the current presidential pardon process is, given, the allegations of unauthorized inclusions?
Well, I started my life as a lawyer with the Legal Aid Council of Nigeria, and I used to do a lot of prison visits because then we were decongesting the prison. To be honest with you, a lot goes on. It is families and relatives and friends of those with money that can really push the names of their persons onto that list. It's not necessarily the criteria of petty crimes first, then women second, then persons with disability. Ideally, that's how the list should be. So a lot of questions are raised about the transparency and whether they are following a criteria or they're just doing something random or selective based on some influences.
Now, with all of these happening, how does the controversy, surrounding the pardon list affect, public confidence in, especially Nigeria's justice and governance systems?
Well, last week I was on your program and the government or some people were condemning the US Congress for trying to label Nigeria as a country of particular concern in religious matters. This is the kind of thing. These countries, they read this newspaper online. They read about our justice sector, how it's been manipulated, or how could you have a list with the lion's share of convicted drug dealers? It raises questions about our processes. So when other countries put us on certain lists, they are basing this on what they have read. If you're a certain sector of your justice system is having problems, then I was a law lecturer before I left Nigeria. One of my students, a master's student, was a former director general of the NDLA. So I have some bit of information about these things. These drug dealers, they have more money. They have connections to influence these things. So if they can influence this list to have the lion's share, then it's worrisome.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Jaja, for having this conversation with us.